a week ago.
I got recorded. Okay.
And we met up with him and his wife, had lunch together, and had a good old chat. But I know him because
Wayne, hold on.
with Rabbi Gold's shearing, Baruch Gold, shear on Wednesday, some Wednesday mornings.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to discuss ether today, or?
We have a lot of British guys today.
Okay.
I think that might mean me hogging the conversation.
Reuben, we see you coming in, but we don't see a picture.
Second.
All right, we can hear you breaking through there. I heard your voice, but the picture still not shown.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, what's the problem? With the cameras on my new computer, it's an older webcam and it apparently conflicts with the operating software. I'll probably get a new one, but I'll be a minute.
Okay. Well, while Rob is getting his technology cleaned up, let's go from just a brief introduction. First of all, let me just say, this is our weekly Tuesday meetings on 8 o'clock Israeli time, which will be, I guess, like 6 o'clock London time, or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock now in US, because they shifted an hour a little bit. And we call this Gul Perplexed. The idea came, it's like our 14th or 15th sessions, and the idea came in Guide to the Perplexed by Maimonides. We call it Perplexion for the Unguided. We try to do something completely open format. And the general idea is basically to not really a debate club, not to bring an opinion and try to convince somebody that how silly that is. Don't you understand that I got it and you don't? But on the contrary, to say, listen, the world has many opinions, and the world has a lot of people religious, non-religious, anywhere in between. They have their background, they have the stories, they have whatever they have. And our objective is to understand another person's view. If the person believes in certain things, or the person just might want to say a joke, or the person would just want to just share some questions or help or whatever, we're here to listen and kind of offer brotherly love to each other. We have a quite diverse group. We have people who are, we have a Chabadniks, Hasidim, Menachem Mendel represent them, Reuven, I don't even know in which category I put all myself. I'm a little bit of everything, and mostly a little bit of nothing. We have people who have a more historical perspective. We have people who call agnostics. And when you ask what it is, some people don't even know what it means. What's the difference between agnostic and atheist, whatever. So we have a new member, John Grabinard, has joined us today, so to speak. And we already have introduction about ourselves. Menachem Mendel is in Beersheba, Reuven also in Beersheba. I'm in Beersheba, Menachem and John are from England originally. Adrian from England. Adrian cannot make it today because he's on a boat trying to clean it up for a spring launching on the river. So we have people who are reviewing our tapes, but not always or not sometimes get on our Zoom program, and they review the tape and send us comments. I wouldn't say criticism, but a feedback. So why don't we take a minute to John for you to introduce yourself, who you are, and how do you don't know us very much, but what do you think?
Okay, well, I'm a retired general practitioner, came to Israel, made Aliyah about just 10 years ago now, and I'm struggling to learn Ivrit. At my age, the brain is made of Teflon. The words go in and they come out again. They don't stick. So my wife and I, Ruth is here too, she's in the background. But we came over after I retired from practice. And I would like to say what category you put me in. Skeptical practicing, something like that. So,
Skeptical practicing. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to
Some people have their wives in the
scientific side of things,
Okay.
and don't always believe everything that the Midrash tells me. I tend to call the Midrash fairy tales, tales for children. But I enjoy practicing. I enjoy taking part in community activities. So I'll go to shul, and I'll take part in the prayers. And yes, I pray and I read the prayers, but I have to read them mostly in English to myself, because if I say them in Hebrew, I just say them and I don't know what they mean. But that's okay.
Okay, well, okay.
That's my sort of state of affairs.
Do you know Reuven by any chance? Reuven just logged in? Because you guys neighbors almost, right? You know.
Yes, we have seen one another. Yeah. Depend. Reuven, I don't think. Do you go to Rambam Shul?
No, I'm hanging out with the Lubavitchers. We're davening at Rinat Yerushalayim.
I've been there once or twice with Pesach. He enjoys going. And it's very nice there because the drosha is given in English.
Yes.
Which is a great improvement. When I go to shul and I listen to the drosha, I have to take a book with me, but I can't understand a word they're saying. So for 10 minutes, I read a book, so remotely connected with religion or Judaism or something like that, something appropriate, just quietly in my seat. And it's quite nice to have the drosha in English so you can understand what people are saying.
Very good, very
Give me
good.
another 30 years and I might get the hang of this Ivrit business.
I think I would just add also, as Menachem Mendel here and Reuven probably remember from the past, our short few months of originations while getting together, for me personally, was actually very beneficial. I wouldn't say just enjoyable, because enjoyable, of course. I really enjoy talking to everybody. I really like everybody in our group. But it's also, it kind of made me a little bit more tolerant, because I came to realizations our group is like polishing the rough edges, so to speak, how much I'm interested to know another person's view. Let's say somebody is saying, I believe in such and such things, and this one, I say, well, tell me more about it. Like we talk about Kabbalah very briefly. Of course, I'm not an expert in Kabbalah at all, but I want to know, like, from the time of Shimon Bar Yochai, roughly 3rd century, 1700 years ago, until, let's say, 13th century, until the times where Moses de Leon actually, some people put it to writing, there's almost like 1,000 years, like 800 years of gap, what was happening there. So I always want to know if anybody knows what happened there. I don't. So I'm interested to kind of understand. I like to know that how another person thinks about things. Even it can be completely contrary to my views. And in fact, the more contrary they are, the more interested I am to understand and respect the opposite, or maybe complementary view to my own. Anything else you can add to this, Menachem?
Yeah, I'm pretty much, just here on this planet, trying to figure things out day to day and get through life, and hopefully hanging out with people who have more experience than me. I can learn something that can help out in this great confusion.
Reuven, any words of wisdom from you on that?
Words of wisdom, what are you guys talking about?
Oh, I just mentioned you were probably changing your camera. I was just saying that I
My
learned,
my internet crashed. I had to relog on.
okay. No, I was just saying I learned a lot in the last like 15, 14 sessions we did of understanding myself, what I really interested in this group, and actually in interested in life in general. I want to understand the other person. And it's not only for the Jew, of course, it's for the from Jewish perspective, but if I was on a plane sitting next to a Chinese guy, and Chinese guy would be Confucianist, I would like to understand what Confucianism and how does it work? Who found it? What year? I have to say that John Gravida here helped me several years ago a lot. I was interested at one time in Ketoret, Besamim, with 11 spices that were made in the times of the temple that Kohanim burned, and of course that incense is prohibited nowadays to be put together, but it's not prohibited to study that. So one of them is Hatzri, that is a bush which happens to also grow in Engedi. So I went to Engedi and I got this bush and I grew it home and it became a big bush. I eventually gave it to a friend of mine who has a bigger garden to grow it. And I was always interested how to do it. John happens to know a lot about this. And I came to him one time for an interview and he gave me some breakdown on particular spices. And John wrote a book, not to embarrass you for your background, wrote actually a book on these things. And I was fascinated with his knowledge and it was so nice and you would never expect it. You know, this is a person who I don't know much of his background. All of a sudden, he knows so much about it. He's a doctor of medicine, and he knows so much about this Ketoret, and I was very fascinated. So you never know what you learn when talking to people.
John, you're a physician?
It was just a talk I gave originally to Limud in England. You may have heard of Limud, the organization that brings together Jews, usually around the time of the winter holiday, to have a sort of cultural, intellectual blitz, rather like going to a crash course in a university. It's great fun, but of course it's been a bit handicapped in the last couple of years because of COVID. But that was the origin of my interest in just looking at that passage in the Siddur just at the end of the service, when everybody's taking off their tallits and getting ready to go home. And there's that little passage on the ingredients of the incense used in the temple.
Yeah, I did a whole dissertation on it, actually. I wrote a whole like booklet on it. I interviewed a lot of people. And I get the sample of everyone, even including some of them that's supposed to come from a sea, from the claw of some sea creature. So I happened to go to Old City in the Arab section of the town, and people told me, careful going there. You know, that's a little bit area that not too many will venture. So I went into the shop and I got this, and it's very like stinky smelling stuff. And of course, we are told in Gemara that these 11 spices have mixture very aromatic, like frankincense, to a very stinky one. And that kind of symbolizes that when Jews get together, no matter how smelly or stinky you are, you're still part of the cloud. We still love you, and no matter what abuse you do, you're still part of the incense. And ultimately, it all comes together, and the smoke that the odor that burning incense emanated rises as a perfect column without waves, actually. And one of the ingredients makes that very straight.
You're saying the incense actually did not smell good.
It smelled very good, but one of the 11 ingredients didn't smell good. But once it was blended with a lot of tan together, it's almost like we talk a story about etrog, lulav. You know, one smells but doesn't taste, another one tastes but doesn't smell, another one smells and smells and doesn't smell, doesn't taste. So the Jews who know nothing, don't practice anything, don't help anybody, kind of meanies, and yet they're still Jews and they're still part of the shaking of etrog. So we don't discard anybody.
Ones that don't smell and don't taste, maybe they had COVID, you know?
Maybe
It's a bit like using garlic when you're preparing a meal. you don't have a large amount of it, just a smear in the bowl. And the strong smell of the garlic is combined with the pleasant odors of the meal and enhances the whole
It
taste.
enhances it, yeah.
Yes. Too bad Adrian was not today with us. Like I said, he's getting his boat ready.
Just the
Because he
better
is
of us.
he's a cook. And I mean, many times when he logs in, behind him, there's a shelf with tons of books. And one time I was just joking, said, boy, look at all this, is it all the volumes of Gemara and Talmud? He said, oh, it's all cooking book. All my religious book over to the right. Behind me is all cooking with like shelves and shelves. So he's a terrific cook. And all interesting, like you say, your wife is listening, so John, when Adrian logs in, my wife and I met also Adrian's and Trish, his wife's also. We had a good conversation, just the four of us. We had a wonderful time. So Trish also sometimes listens in. And, and Menachem, I can see now, his daughter, I think, is peeking in every so often. And last time Menachem said she had a question, actually. And we said, look, she had a question, ask the question. I mean, we don't have any boundaries or gag orders that below a certain age you can ask any questions you have. Just should, we're very tolerant to questions, or we're evolving to become very tolerant.
Ruth is here and listening. Too far away.
Hi, how are you?
Reading her book at the moment.
Okay. We discussed it. I think Menachem and I just talked about it the other day. Should we introduce in our meetings a guest speaker? Somebody comes in and you said, let's say today we talk about Rambam or about Rashi, about this. And then we said, well, that's probably not a good idea because we only have like 40 minutes usually. Sometimes we really get involved. We go relog in for a second session for dessert for about 10 minutes. The dessert session, we'll call it. But it was a guest speaker. We'll be talking for 30 minutes of Rambam, 40 minutes Rambam. What can you really say in 30 minutes? And if you really want to know Rambam, most people probably can get a book and go online to get the shiur and learn a lot of Rambam without having guest speaker. So I still didn't know if that's a good idea or not. So we decided for now, keep it just completely open format. Say, tell a joke, ask where you are, any questions you have. I have a lot of phobias. I mean, people usually, when people know each other very well, they open up to each other, but it takes time. Rob and I are bikers. We all bike together every so often. I always complain to him about your doctor, my shoulder hurts. You know what you think? And he said, don't worry about it. I feel better. But I have certain things about life. I'm 67 years old, and I made some mistakes in the past life. And I was hoping that if I do Teshuva, as the Torah tells me Teshuva, everything is forgiven if you really do Teshuva, and everything gets fixed. But then I always have a question: can certain things be fixed that I wish were fixed, even if I did the full Teshuva? If I ask God to forgive me for certain mistakes I made in my life in the past, would God will say, okay, you're forgiven? But would He still? But if you're forgiven, can you fix that? Can you rewind the person's background and turn it into the rails of how I wish it went? Or does God says, listen, like He told Moshe Rabbeinu when he wanted to go to Israel, He says, they're all going there, but you're not going there. And I also always tend to put the emphasis, not that, but you're not going, but you are not going there, but you are not going there. Meaning they all go to your areas, but you're going to a better place. You're coming with me. I have a special VIP lounge for you. So maybe when you make the Teshuva, even though you cannot rerun the scenario of life that you wish you did if you didn't make mistakes, that prevented that to happen, but then the alternative after you do a full Teshuva God gave you would be probably better than what you think yourself would have been a better choice.
Well, I have a question here. What does forgive mean? And is this just a religious concept? And how is it even possible to forgive based on, I guess, the tradition, just forget that something happened? Something happened and it happened. How can it be possible to just, if assuming that forgiving just means kind of forgetting and overlooking what had happened and moving on, how is that possible? Why is that possible? And why is that even a good thing?
Well, the two are quite distinct. One can forgive somebody a crime, provided they paid the penalty and have shown remorse. But it isn't forgotten. The crime was still committed. It stays on their record, as you might say. And they have to live with that. And even if they've reformed, become a better person, they still have this crime in their past history. So the two things are separate. We say forgive and forget, but actually it is wiser to remember and not forget, not obliterate the past, but accept it. So as for forgiving, you have to ask the question, who? Who is forgiving who? The person who is offering the prayer for forgiveness, who can give them forgiveness?
Well, maybe it wouldn't be depends. If somebody is religious, then of course they'll say Hashem forgives. But let's say somebody is agnostic, not religious. He or she also might have a sincere desire to be forgiven. And that person, I would guess, to Menachem's question, maybe would be forgiven not by God if the person is agnostic, but by another person. You go to another person, listen, I'm sorry. When we were in high school, I stole your pencil. That was your favorite pencil. I remember how much you cried. It's a favorite pencil. Your father gave it to you, and I stole it. Never told you. Now I'm telling you. I say, oh, I am so devastated, but at least I feel better after 50 years. You told me it was you. I never would suspected that. So now you're forgiven. You feel better that you finally admitted, oh, I feel better. I can't change it. The pencil is gone. But at least you feel better the person forget. It took me 50 years to come to this guy and tell him it was me who stole your pencil when we were in the 2nd or 5th grade. So that kind of forgiveness, maybe Menachem is
it a necessity, would you say? Would you say forgiveness is a necessity?
Necessity?
Mm-hmm.
For who?
I don't know.
In life, I mean, people make a whole big deal out of it. The whole of Christianity is kind of just built around this whole concept. Like, why is it such a focus? It just seems like such a strange thing. Like, do we really even need it? I think a lot of people go on in their lives without it. Like, why is it such a big deal?
The idea is that people feel charata, they have a feeling of regret, and they like to feel that God has forgiven them, is not going to have to punish them in the next life or in this life, or
If I may offer the thought of this, it's interesting. I was listening carefully what John said. This is what I thought. I heard somewhere that forgiveness, Teshuva, Teshuva, has 3 levels. The first Teshuva is, let's say I stole the pencil from Menachem or from Ra. And then 30 years later, I say, it wasn't nice. So I call him and say, listen, I'm really sorry I stole your pencil. He said, okay, don't worry about it. I get over it. But thanks for letting me know. Okay, great. That's Teshuva. I made Teshuva. But it's not a full Teshuva. If I come across the same situation, maybe I steal a pencil for another guy because he's not as nice as Rob. So from him, I can steal it. Rob, I feel bad. So secondly, is that I really understand the second level. It was the wrong thing to do. It bothers me not only because I stole it from my friend, but because it's a wrong thing to do. And it bothers me. How can I do that? So I call it, and at the second, if you do that, then I heard it, then you're actually, the memory of that crime is erased. After that, it erased. You're no longer even hunted for this. Of course, as John, as you're indicating, it might be downside to that because maybe for the future, you don't learn on this experience, but that's second. The third level I heard to show is that if you're really sorry, not only it's a horrible thing to do, but you can say, I'm ashamed of myself. How can you're so sorry? You just don't know what to do. You want to give up your life to repair this. Then God, and of course you still have to call the guy or meet him and say, not just in your mind, and they have to be, and you ask forgiveness, and hopefully you're forgiven. Then God makes that negative into the positive. In my example, if I stole the pencil, and the pencil because of this special pencil, I became a famous artist. I competed with Picasso, and my portraits are shown in London exhibits and New York exhibits, and became multimillionaire, very famous, and great because of this pencil. It will never happen if I didn't do Teshuva number 3, because you can't really gain a lot of good things from doing something bad. But if you're sincerely forgiven, then minus, actually, just simplify example, turns actually into the plus. In that sense, not only memory of it gets erased, but the negative becomes positive. But you can't do it a priori. You can't say, well, I'm going to steal a pen, being a famous artist, then I ask forgiveness and everything will be fine. You cannot plan that. It has to naturally happen. You have to make a crime like this. You have to sincerely ask forgiveness and repent, teshuva, and then something good will happen. So in my example, for example, I'll tell you, when I left Russia, and my mother was still in Russia, and many times I called her, and she was by herself, and she always missed me. And I, as a young man at the time living in Russia, always felt like, Mom, come on, you have your sister there, you have cousins, don't worry about it. And only later I understand how insensitive I was to my mother. So to this day, I wish that my mother could forgive me. My mother has passed away 9 years ago. So if I make sincere teshuva, and I think I did, I can't bring my mother's back. I can't even tell her that I'm sorry. So it haunts me in a way. And I want to be able to come to terms with this. And just one example. And I'm thinking, would Hashem listen to say, okay, Lev, I'm going to help you. And this is how I do it for you. And then all of a sudden, my mind and my soul is at peace. Because even though I did something not good, I wasn't a bad son, but I call her once a week from America on Sunday for about 30 minutes. And how are you, Mom? Everything good? How is you? And go, okay, fine, great. Okay, well, okay, call next week. Okay, love you. I didn't think I did anything
Lev,
bad.
what are you talking about exactly? Lev, what are you talking about?
I'm
You've
talking to
lost me.
teshuva. If you make it teshuva, can you be then
What's
forgiven?
the question? I mean, where are you going with this?
Subject to teshuva. Is it possible for the person to rewind the history and make your past?
Now, the sages say that tshuva is a time machine. If you really do tshuva, all the past sins turn into merits, and God brings about that it will all turn out for good.
I don't
Yeah,
feel it
believe
yet.
that.
My example is my mom. I don't feel that. I still feel uncomfortable. Very
Well, one thing
painful.
is you have to understand, the Rebbe said that the Yetzer Hara tries to use sadness to turn you to sin. And that the Yetzer Hara actually likes the sin more for the fact that it makes you depressed and sad than for the actual whatever benefit he gets from the sin. So you have to make it, the Rebbe talked about this for many times, that you have to make a decision that if something comes into your head just to make you feel sad, it's from the Yetzer Hara, and you have to throw it out of your head. Just flush it down the toilet, just kick it out.
Good advice. Let me
yeah.
ask you this, guys, not to pry into a private life, of course. I don't want to, but do you have similar things in your past that you kind of regret and made teshuva and you hope that things went a different way? Or you do it just, okay, it's in the past. I mean, I did the best I can. Everything's fine.
Well, I have a question of it because I once had a friend who told me, he said, look, I don't regret anything because whenever I did something at that moment in time, that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I guess, prying into this is, is regret and forgiveness specifically a religious thing, something, a spiritual thing, or, you mentioned before, just to make yourself feel good for something that you maybe have done in the past. You're kind of convincing yourself that it's okay what you did. Or is it something more than that? Would have people kind of come up with this if it wasn't something that came from Hashem? If someone believes in Darwinism, is there really such a thing as feeling bad? Why should anyone ever feel bad for something they've done, or regret, or need forgiveness? Is there some kind of benefit for this, or?
Go ahead, John.
Yes, in evolutionary terms, the benefit is in creating a social construction. Human beings are social animals, and we need to live together in groups, small groups like family groups, tribes, nations, and the whole world. So we have, under the Darwinian explanation, evolved brain patterns, the ability to socialize with other people. And that means making compromises, not always seizing what is in front of you and taking it for your own because you're strong, but recognizing the value of altruism. Altruism is one of the hardest things to explain, both in religious terms and in scientific terms. Why does altruism exist? Why do people do things for other people whom they don't know, complete strangers? One thinks of the volunteers who go out to help people in earthquake situations. It's called altruism. One thinks, sadly, of the people who are trying to help the Ukrainians survive the war. When there's they have no connection, they know nobody in Ukraine, just doing it, what's the common phrase, out of the goodness of their heart. This is a human attribute, and it's very difficult to explain. You are asking what are the bad things that you think about that you wish you hadn't done? Well, these usually come to me about 3 o'clock in the morning when I wake up and think of all the things that I should have done to that patient 10, 20, 30 years ago. And of course, that's the mind going over bad ideas. What you don't tend to do so often is to think of all the good things that you actually achieved in the course of those 30 years. Modesty.
Evolutionary point of view.
To say, I was a good doctor. I wasn't, I was an average doctor. Fortunately, most people who fall ill get better. So you rely on that statistic for your reputation. Sometimes you do good, and occasionally I remember the successes. But I have to say, at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's the failures that disturb me.
But John, but that's a little bit different, because I would imagine as a doctor, I would imagine as a doctor, you have some failures, you have successes, but the failures are not intentional. You say, I wish I used this scalpel instead. I wish I gave him aspirin instead of this, and that killed the poor guy. But I just made a mistake. But in my case, I didn't just make a mistake. I knowingly was doing the wrong thing. I just didn't know at the time that was the wrong thing. Not sensitive to my mom.
You don't consider it. It's different. You have to put it in perspective of where your head was at and what your moral development was. And I think you have to be kinder to yourself that you've made maybe and you've improved, and that's all anybody can ask. Nobody's perfect in the world, does every single thing right. I don't think, there are a few people here and there that do, but
If
I
they
don't
are,
know.
they're liars.
We have a saying in medicine, you'd appreciate this, John, that good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Maybe you've heard that before.
Well,
it's just the Talmud actually says that you can't hold a doctor liable for bad outcomes where they did the best they could under the circumstances. If somebody maliciously tries to hurt someone, that's one thing, but what goes for malpractice nowadays would be not considered halakhically valid in the Talmud.
I think nowadays we would say, if you follow the consensus of medical opinion, even if it goes wrong, you're not liable in legal terms.
So what is,
but just okay, just going further into that. So this seems to be a great example. Like, you're always trying to do the best you can, but it seems even when people get into like a fight with each other, if you ask either side, they will both tell you that they have, you know, good intentions in mind. Like they say sometimes you get upset with the people you love most because you care so much about their personality, and that it really bothers you that they're acting. You care so much that you want them to be such a good person. That's what really bothers you. So yeah, it's why should anyone regret something when at that moment in time they really had the intention of doing something? They had an argument with someone because they really cared that this person would understand this concept, you know, the way they do, which is obviously the right way. It's just such a.
You just feel bad about if you cause harm to somebody, you know, you fill you with regret. Sometimes you can do things sort of unconsciously, you know, without really thinking about it. And later on, you may sort of wake up from that unconsciousness and realize what you thought was just being yourself was being, you know, obnoxious or harmful.
You know, this
So,
gentleman,
you know,
you know, this gentleman, how today was kind of like, as I was listening to, he was saying kind of like a somber discussion about regrets and mistakes like this. And we had sessions like where we're like agitated and fighting, and see how we kind of mellowed down and started to be very quiet and polite and tell me about your childhood. Like this. So interesting. Let me ask you, we have about 2.5 minutes to the end of the session. What would we, and what would the next time get together? What would you like? Should we just simply get in together as friends, or becoming more and more friends, and just whatever comes to mind, or any particular topic we'd like to talk about?
Why don't we start going through different customs that we all have on Pesach?
Okay.
When it comes to the Seder, we could sit and talk for hours and hours, but anyway, it's like 4 or 5 weeks to Pesach. We could have, I don't know, discuss different things we do or questions or whatever.
I'm okay with that. What do you think, guys?
okay.
Have you ever read the Chaim Bermant piece about preparing for Pesach? I'll see if I can find a copy of it, and I'll try and send it.
Yeah, post it.
Okay.
Right? It makes for entertaining reading.
And then we can discuss it as we get together. All right.
I'll see if I can dig it up. It's in our Pesach file that my wife gets ready just about Purim time. Pesach cleaning was started some time ago.
Terrific. Well, that's what we'll do. We'll sort of like kick it off, and everybody gives like maybe 5-minute snapshot of what they do. They'll give us at least 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll have some comments and discussions on that. It's an interesting idea.
Okay.
Cool. Any final comments before we huh? Sorry, John?
Is that next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, 8 o'clock, every Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Yeah. And I hope more people will join us, and we'll develop, and the more diverse the better, because you see, guys, the difference between this session and like 5, 10 before, we're no longer probing each other. How come you don't think like me? How come don't you understand? We're just kind of nonchalant, easy. We like your opinion. I have different opinion, but yours is good. And we'll talk about the customs. It's wonderful, nice things. And whatever comes along, we'll then discuss it as well.
I miss the old days. I miss the good old days.
You miss you like a little spiny fight a little bit? All right, guys. Well, good. A couple of seconds. Gentlemen, have a great, get a great Purim tomorrow. Have an easy fast. And a Purim after that. And then a nice Shabbat. And we'll catch up next time on Tuesday. All right, guys. Shabbat shalom. Happy